Vamos arrancar, começa com a música, o blackout sai num sítio específico, o Gábor vai dizer agora, no blackout entre o Mário e o João. Vale? Até já.
It goes in 15 seconds. My family is a family of artists. My father was a director himself. He studied in Germany in the 1930s, and in Budapest he studied with Max Reinhardt. And after the Second World War, he went home to Transylvania to fund the theater. So he's the founding artistic director of the theater in the town I was born. And he was a liberal person. He had always left socialist ideas, and from him I learned that kind of traditional liberal values, which is all about social justice, equality, freedom of expression, freedom of opinion and speech. To do something for a community as well. And these values kept being alive with us, even in the hardest time, because what happened in the 50s, 60s, then 70s, 80s, with a little relaxation in the mid-60s in those Eastern European countries, especially Romania, had nothing to do with the traditional liberal values. The Ceausescu regime, which became a dictatorship, step by step oppressed the rights of the ethnic minorities, including Germans, Serbians, but especially Hungarians. And that was a kind of double oppression, because, you know, the free thinkers, the intellectuals were already enemies of the people, and they were oppressed, banned, followed, and finally even banished from the country, because many intellectuals, being, you know, not only writers and artists, but also doctors, engineers, philosophers, and so on, they immigrated to the West or to Hungary, if they were Hungarians, to Germany, the native, the ethnic Germans, a lot of them left, and it became one of the harshest dictatorships, especially in the 80s, starting with the so-called Cultural Revolution. It was a very strong censorship, which especially affected theaters and movies. So they came to watch a so-called ideological general rehearsal, and they granted a permission or banned or censored the performances. So they always had some observations which they wanted to take out from certain performances in order to give the permission to present the performance. And there were sometimes crazy things, sometimes hilarious, ridiculous. Even in a performance of Fade Off, for example, which was harmless politically, they found, because their mind worked in a way that they were afraid. The fear worked, and they overdid also. Not everything came from the top. Not everything came from the president or the, you know, the secretary of the chief secretary of the Communist Party. So they were crazy. Some of the performances, I had myself performances by Bulgakov, and even a Romanian classical playwright, which was severely censored. And the show, if you refused, it might have been banned, but then you were considered already a dangerous opposition anyway if they saw something which was subversive. But this was also somehow a chance for some directors to formulate their work in a metaphorical way and not in a direct way. And this is closer to the idea of theater, which is not presenting reality. It's reflecting upon reality. In the movies, it was different. It was very difficult to go through the censorship with an honest screenplay. So it was almost impossible to do movies in the 80s which were honest and didn't lie. That's why, for example, I chose not to do movies. I graduated from a theater and film directing academy in Bucharest, having some great masters, some of them world-known great artists like Liviu Ciulei or Radu Penculescu, and they taught us this kind of poetry of theater in which the metaphors work stronger than the direct way, so addressing it directly with words. The extra-textual theater became very strong in Romania in the 70s, 80s. Of course, after the Cultural Revolution, some great directors were forced to leave the country. Some of the best, in the 70s especially. Andrei Șerban left to the United States, Lucian Pintilie left to Paris, Liviu Ciulei to Germany, then to the United States, David Esrig in Germany. These were great, great masters and also great directing teachers. So I didn't go. I was offered some jobs in both Germany and Hungary at the second half of the 80s, but I didn't go. I don't know why, but it were my reasons to stay were less than the reasons to go, but they were stronger. Some things, you know, I don't know, the landscape and the so-called spirit of opposition, because we also edited a subversive samizdat magazine, which was handwritten or typewriter written. It was called Counterpoints, and we were also persecuted for that. And actually, after a while, after 85 or 84, you had to go yearly with your typewriter. If you had a typewriter, you had to announce it at the police, and you had to go every year with a page of sample of your typewriter. So they checked if you don't change the typewriter or the letters, or they are the same. So they recognize if there is a kind of subversive samizdat, writing which is, spread underground in an unofficial, illegal way. So it was also difficult for Hungarians. Hungarians had to learn some of the, in the schools, they shrank a lot of disciplines which were taught in Hungarian, so the history has been taught in Romanian. They were spread by, just putting these numbers in the mailboxes or even just hand to hand. So they, for many years, 3 or 4 years, they didn't know. And somebody, of course, they were built-in people who were working for the Securitate, collaborators, and some of them were because they were frightened and they persecuted and even physically abused them, or some people were threatened by and the others who the Securitate tried to organize to convince people to denounce others, and that was awful. Between 82 and 89, I was followed. I was arrested in 82 because of these counterpoints and because the disappearance, the temporary disappearance of the main editor, and they were looking for him. He was hiding somewhere in a hospital in the Hungarian populated part of Transylvania. And I was arrested for 2 days and threatened that I will never direct again, and kept there for 2 days only. And after that, I was followed. I knew exactly which car, but it was before that we were followed for a while until they found this counterpoint. But we didn't know that we were followed. After that, I knew. So it was more frightening when you didn't know, because then they wanted you to know that they keep an eye on you. And so I worked, but still my performances, even if some of them were banned, but some of them were even, we succeeded to do Hamlet, then after a few shows it was banned. I did Tango by Mrožek. There were strong texts, and it's even in the 80s, some performances were very strong and politically very radical. And sometimes we wonder how did they go through. It's depending on people always. Even in these committees, there were some who didn't realize, or some who just wanted, and some of them who, you know, silently disagreed with the regime. It was hard, but theater could work, and this was the time when you could rework the classical plays and reinvent them, because they couldn't ban a classical playwright.
Friend? Rush? Wieder!
Good, let's stop here. In the last years, there were some plays which, because of the growing dictatorship, censorship, the poverty, the lack of everything in the country. So it was almost impossible that any line, which was a critical line in a play, was speaking about the power. That's why some performances which were not even opposition performances or subversive, but you know, if somebody said there is no meat in the shops in a comedy, people were hugely applauding because it was about the situation. So they were more vigilant in the last years, even, you know, thinking that, oh, if you do Richard III, you will speak about Ceausescu. And they were more cautious, and they forbid these texts, not only proposed to take out parts. And some of these performances had more than 15 ideological rehearsals. They kept trying to trim out parts, and some, you know, people, theaters wanted to present the show, others said no, we don't want to because we can't change too much, and then it was always a kind of uncertainty about it. And in the last 2 years it was very difficult, but in the last year there was a kind of strange, weird softening. I did a play by Gao Xingqian. This is a Chinese Nobel Prize winner playwright, which is called The Bus Stop. We were 100% sure that it will be stopped, but they didn't even change anything, and it was a sign that there was something underground preparation, because the 89 turning point, we can, it's a lot of discussion, and we can argue if it was a revolution or if it was a state coup. But it was a huge euphoria. You could travel, you could, you know, there was the so-called fast capitalizing the country, which now, if I look back, it's a very rude process. It's kind of wild capitalism which happened there. And what happens now, you know, in 30 years we got to the, let's say, the dictatorship of the financial capitalism. the banking system and so on. Who could have predicted? Nobody then. People were not even curious to find out how it happened, how we came. It was important that Ceausescu is down, is killed. It's a change. There were so many years of hard dictatorship, so many years, at least 20 years of very hard dictatorship, more than in any other Eastern European countries at the moment. Even the Soviet Union in the 80s, with the coming of Gorbachev, with the perestroika, was lighter and more relaxed.
Não falamos mal, então, da nossa geração. Ela não é mais infeliz do que as precedentes. Tampouco falamos bem. Não falamos dela, simplesmente.
It's very interesting to talk about this in the perspective of the today's digital world, which is almost Orwellian, because what was the hard work of the Securitate in those times, like putting bugs in your apartment to listen to your phone conversations, now you do it yourself on the Facebook and by the satellites and the phones, which are, I witnessed many times that my phone is listened today as well. So yes, it was a very strange, absurd time. That's why I think our sensitivity to the absurd drama is very refined. What to do, what to do, what to do, and then I start to try to do. And then always pay attention to the result, you know? I mean, pack, she doesn't stop. Another one, pack, she doesn't stop. I was only 32 when I took over the Hungarian Theater of Cluj, which is the oldest Hungarian theater in the world. It was founded in 1792. And the first building officially opened 200 years ago, this March on the 21st. It was a theater of great tradition, and it was also Cluj and the Hungarian population, the theater goers, the spectators were more conservative. So there was a lot of work to do. My theater wasn't in that line. And in the first years, I had a lot of criticism and even extreme reactions and wars against the artistic program that I was putting forward. So I also mixed a lot from what I learned as a former student of the Romanian School of Theater, and I invited a lot of Romanian directors to work with our company, which plays in Hungarian language. So there was at least 10-year-long or even more war against the theater I wanted to, against the artistic program. But then the theater consolidated itself by having a lot of, getting a lot of international recognition. Theater never could change, but theater should always keep a mirror, as Hamlet says, hold up a mirror to nature and to the what happens in the world. And I think that because theater is an encounter, is a meeting between those on the stage and those in the auditorium or in a common space. And the very important thing is the experience, that people see themselves in the mirror of the others and they may accept better the criticism or the horrifying image that you show about humanity or the hope. And I think that theater is political, but I like that kind of theater which is not the manifesto political, which, you know, say slogans from the stage. If theater invites people to self-reflect and see that now we cannot always blame some outside force, whether it's political, whether it's a regime, So there was a tendency in the political theater that, oh yes, they are responsible. The government, the power, the regime, we are not. But that's very bad, that's fake. We have to see what was our role, what is our role in letting these things happen.
1, 2, back, and I sing forward. Is it?
Yes, what I would like to say, it's very good now that you say, don't let her go, you go there, and when you say almost like together, you know. Theater should put questions, should doubt, should pull away the curtain and see what's behind. That's the notion of apocalypse. Apocalypse doesn't mean end of the world. It's pulling away the curtain and put the hands on the subject, on the matter, on the problem. So we have to come with real problems, not trendy ones. We have to fight for truth. We have to try to discover truths about ourselves as well, and see in which way we are responsible also for what happens.
O que é? Alguma vez leste a Bíblia? A Bíblia? Deve ter passado os olhos. Lembras-te dos evangelhos? Lembro-me dos mapas da Terra Santa. Eram coloridos, muito bonitos. O Mar Morto era azul claro. Só o aspecto dele dava-me sede.
It's not the pandemic that makes Waiting for Godot powerful in all times. I think one of the things is very much preoccupying me. So I am very preoccupied by that question of salvation. Waiting for Godot is probably the last dramatic work about salvation, about the way we can respond with our lives only to whatever we were created for. So I'm a Christian person, I'm Catholic as well. Beckett was a Protestant, but Beckett's ideas here are those of a Christian who is pushing the final questions, pushing the essential questions of existence to the limit, almost questioning God. Is that, why doesn't the miracle happen now? What is the sense of our existence? Are we here? Are we here? Are we visible? And he puts those questions also in a laboratory of the stage. Because are we here? Does somebody see us? Is those same question of the theater. Now we do theater without public, without spectators. Does it make sense? In a way, it's a crazy, absurd activity, hopefully only very, very temporary, and it will end. But think about it, what would happen if theater keeps being even financed, but for nothing, for no, this is the most essential thing, and some people may consider it dangerous because of this meeting. Ideologies don't like opposition, yes? So Waiting for Godot is so many layers. It's a musical structure, first of all. And this musical structure makes it so viable, so lasting, so, eternally valid. The musical structure is composed by a huge precision, and it requires from all the creative team members, actors, directors, to try to sink down under your personality and become nobody in order to make the music sound. So one of the most important things is to approach to it as a musical structure with this kind of let's say, humility. And it also teaches us. I did a lot of Beckett, I read a lot of Beckett, and it helps me accept the final things with a kind of resignation, which doesn't mean a giving up. It means a hope that there are things which I am not able to accomplish or to finish, but they are my brothers, humans, who will help me get closer, and there is somebody, the creator, who has a plan with us. And you know, there is a great poet in Hungary called, who died many years ago, but one of the greatest, who only wrote 120 poems, János Pilinszky. And he was asked, what are your hopes? And he said, I hope that I will succeed to die, because so far everybody succeeded. So it's a dignity of passing away. You know, it speaks about the solidarity, the fact that we are very interdependent, that we are a family, that we cannot abandon each other, that we cannot be selfish, that life is not easy, there are no easy solutions, but we have to carry our cross. And it's a lot of fun as well. I mean, Beckett's plays are not dark plays. They just say that there's no easy way, you have to go on. Despair is the supreme form of hope. Hope becomes or comes when despair is in the highest position, so it's pushed to the limit. And I think that what he says, that we have to go and do all our things every single day, all the way to the end. And we, you know, like we have to live our own lives, our own destinies. Estragon wants to get rid of his shoes and leave them, because he says it's like putting down your own cross. You cannot, there is a proverb, you cannot step in anyone else's shoes or try to step in my shoes, because you have your own life. It's the metaphor of carrying the cross all the way through. I think that's a very Christian play, which says that if there is no resurrection, then our lives is absurd. If we don't believe there is something else, and if to get there we only can give all the responses to the big questions with our own lives. That's the thing where Beckett's ideas become so close to the theater itself, because the theater actually is for that it's only with our own lives that we can answer to any questions.
Parece mais arbusto.
Uma vergonha.
Arbusto?
Estás a insinuar-me? Não sei que andámos no sítio.
Ele já cá devia estar.
Não tenho a certeza que vinha.
E se não vier?
Voltamos amanhã.
E depois da manhã?
Eventualmente.
E por aí fora?
A questão
Até
é...
que ele venha.
É assim piedoso.
Nós já cá viemos ontem.
Não, aí estás a enganar.
I think that the translation is always very important in Beckett's works, because being so precise, it's very hard to find both the sense, the exact sense, and the music. Actually, I directed Waiting for Godot in Ireland, and when I heard at the auditions two brilliant actors who are now Olivier Award winners, and you know, then they weren't yet, and Tony Award winners, Sean Campion, Conleth Hill, they came to read. They didn't have time to learn by heart, and they came to read a scene, and I realized that, yes, this is the rhythm, the music of the play. Beckett wrote it in French first, but he translated his own work in English from French, using also learning from the experience of the first performance in Paris. And I think that there is a rhythm, the humor, the lightness of it. He says, my plays should be done quickly, precisely, and well. So the music itself and the senses. And the Portuguese language for me is a very poetic language. I love Pessoa. It's wonderful. Listening to Turismo Infinito, for example, just listening to it, I saw twice the performance, is wonderful. And every language in its poetry, in its richness, in its conservation and also renewal, both the conservation and the renewal of the language, which is such a rich entity, always in movement, always in development. It cannot be. There are a lot of attempts to kill the language, because now everything is very global, and the global language is English. We are speaking English now, and but I think that there will be a revival of the languages, and such plays like Waiting for Godot in new translations, or even Shakespeare, who needs to be retranslated from time to time in order to speak to the newer generations. I think that it is important to do such playing back. And the musicality of the Portuguese language is different from the English or Hungarian, but there is something big in common, you know. We are living, or hopefully we are living in a very collaborative Babel now. I'm always challenged to learn languages more and more and more. First of all, you have to know your own mother tongue, your native language very well. And then, when you know it very well, you have to do the same thing with others, because learning more languages helps you get closer to other people and other cultures. And the theater is a bridge between the different cultures. The good theater, of course, can be understood by those who are not speaking the language of the actors on the stage. So I think also that one of the ways to learn foreign languages is to recite poems before you know the sense of the words. So that was my experience with Pessoa, and I find that the Waiting for Godot in Portuguese sounds very special, and I believe that our translation is a very good one, because I feel it already, knowing the English text, not the French, but the English. I feel it very close to the sense, but it's still very appropriate to the Portuguese. I think I'm really happy to have the privilege to listen to it in Portuguese.
Vamos embora.
Não podemos.
Porquê?
Estamos à espera de Godot.
Tens a certeza que é aqui?
O quê?
Que temos de esperar?
Isso ao pé da árvore.